Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started, everybody. My name is Chris Chavez. I'm a professor with the School of Journalism and Communication. We're going to do a round of introductions shortly, but I just wanted to introduce some of our panelists. Laura Bobilski from English department, and then Lynn Stevens from the Department of Anthropology. This panel not only brings in different kinds of expertise in terms of advising students. Lynn and I were both on different jobs committees last year. And so we're looking at it from different perspectives, preparing our students to go off into the marketplace, but also receiving incoming candidates who want to work here at the University of Oregon. So we're able to provide, I think, between the three of us, really different kinds of points of view. And then we also represent different kinds of disciplines because so much of this is going to be generalized in nature, but so much of it is going to be really specific to your discipline. So thank you for that. Before I get into the information, I do want to make a quick announcement for an event that's happening at the Museum of Art, Necro Archivos de las Americas. It's a curated event. There's several different kinds of talks that are happening over the course of the next couple of weeks, but interesting stuff about social justice, across the world. So I just wanted to share some of that information as well. In terms of what we're going to discuss today, we're going to spend some time doing a round of introductions that I had mentioned, getting started with the process, what to think about, how to manage your time going into it. We're going to go into the mechanics of preparing your dossier, what's included in a dossier, and then what happens after that, navigating the process as you move from the application submission, through the initial phone interviews, through the Zoom interviews, on-campus interviews, if it gets to that, and then to wrapping up with the hopefully with the offer and negotiation process. And then we'll conclude with some nod to resources, and then we'll follow up with some Q&A. So we just want to give everybody ample opportunity to be able to talk. But before we get into that, because we have a small intimate group, we just want to get a sense of where you are in the process. Some of you may be on the job market now, which has already sort of started probably months ago. Others of you might be in there in the next year or so, some of you in a couple of years. So if we could go around the room and if you could say your name, your unit, the program that you're with, and then where you are in the process at this point. And again, we could just sort of help understand where the room is.
Hey everybody, my name is Koshal, Unit 3PM, Planning Public Policy and Management, public works downstairs. I need to finish, so that's what I am. I don't know what that means to the job market, so I need to finish.
Hi, I'm Avery. I'm from the Prevention Science Department in the College of Education, and I am not on the academic job market yet. I think next year I'll do like a trial run of being on the academic job market, but really aiming to do more of a postdoc situation immediately after graduating, but definitely in the next few years we'll be on the job market.
Excellent, thank you.
I'm Mariana. I'm a fourth year in the Administrative Ethnic Studies department. I just advanced to candidacy. So
Congratulations.
Thank you. I've just started to put the feelers out there, like what the job market looks like. So I'm just keeping exploring what's out there.
Excellent, thank you.
Sorry.
I'm Christy Downs. I'm in the finance department. I'm just starting my third year. I'm in a weird situation because I already have a job lined up. So I already have a job planned, but it won't be a tenure track position. So I'm planning that my next job market is going to.
Excellent, thank you.
My name is Julio. I'm from SOJC, Chris Chavez. I'm second year, so I'm still kind of early in the process, but I think it's not too early to start preparing. So I kind of want to know more, and probably next year I'll start like submitting some, looking for some opportunities and some things.
And you're absolutely right. It never is too early to start thinking about this kind of stuff. Yeah.
I'm Philippa. I'm in the Anthropology department. I'm in my 8th year of the program. And so I'm really looking to graduate this year, looking at jobs next year. I'm also international, and so I would like to stay in the US a little bit longer, so I'm worried about like what jobs are accessible to me. I'm very open to I would love to do a postdoc in archaeology and anthropology, not super common. And so looking for any other opportunities to stay connected or something else.
Yeah, awesome, thank you.
Hello everybody, I'm Payman. I'm from Theater Arts Department. It's my last year of PhD, and I'm an international student, and I need the job. Good with it.
Hi, so I'm here as a Grad. For 1 year, but my position is a researcher and I'm in prevention science now. And I'm super interested in getting a postdoc job after graduation, so I need.
Excellent.
Hi everyone, my name is Nina. I'm from Political Science Department, an international student from Armenia. This is my 4th year and I'm getting ready sometime coming 2 years.
Hi everyone, I'm Jessie and I'm first year in political science. I'm here to grab as much as information and serving as possible. Hi everyone, my name is Moon Young. I'm a second year PhD student from the political science department. Since I'm in my second year, I like to share some of my.
Excellent. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Madhya. I'm a 5th year PhD candidate from the Department of Anthropology. Just trying to get a sense of what's out there and figure out what I'd like to do.
Morning, everyone. I'm Alejandro Otero. It's my 4th year in the Roman Feminist Department. So I'm still early for the job market. I'm still really looking forward to this presentation and figure out more about the market. Also, I would like to be if it's possible to address because besides, since I see that we have plenty of international students here, not only that we are landing a good job offer, but also finding a sponsor for the visa. If that could be also addressed, would be great.
Hello everyone, my name is Mahela. I'm in the RL department. I'm in the middle of the storm right now. I'm applying. This is my last year. I'm writing my dissertation, the last chapter. So
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Angelica Hernandez Viera. This is my 2nd year of the Spanish PhD. I'm the Roman languages department. And like some of our peers here, I'm starting early to see what is in there for the job.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much.
Hello, I'm Jack. I'm in the history department. I'm dissertating right now, and it feels like there's no light at the end of the tunnel. But I suspect at some point there will be. So here I am.
There is. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tolly. I'm in the philosophy department as PhD, and I'm a 7th year, and I'm currently in the job.
Sarah, I'm also from the Roman languages department, and this is also my last year. I started to apply last week.
Yeah.
So same, I really need to get into that, and also I'm international, so I'm also interested in the questions of visa, sponsorships, and all of that.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Do we get everybody?
Hi, Benny. My 4th year architecture. I just finished my field work and hopefully I'll start writing dissertation.
Yeah.
We'll see. What else? Yeah.
Excellent. And then,
Environment management.
oh yeah.
Right, my apartment.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you all for sharing. Congratulations on the work that you're doing. I know we're at different places, which is kind of a nice balance. Some of you are right in the thick of this. Others are just beginning to understand what this process looks like. There are many jobs that you could get with a PhD, but I think what we wanted to do for purposes of here was to focus specifically on the academic job hunt. Because it is so singular and so filled with mystery, as some of that you are many of finding. And so getting started is one of the first things that we'll get into. When you kind of hear what people are talking in terms of the room, they're dissertating while they're looking for a job. And in some cases, that is a lot of work to put on your plate, as well as a lot of pressure, right? So your mindsets are in 2 different kinds of places. And I understand and probably read the room, there's a certain amount of angst that comes with that, right? And so we want to acknowledge that angst, but also there are ways to plan for it. Again, just knowing going in there, it can be competitive, right? For any given jobs, particularly tenure track positions are highly competitive, highly sought after. It can be a long process, unlike other job searches that you may have been in. An academic job search can take close to a year, but before when you start to apply for jobs, to when actually you step into your office for the first time, it could be well over a year between when that happens. What that means is that there's a lot of time to think, overthink, to stew on these kinds of things. There can be times when they are circuitous, meaning that sometimes a job posting will open up and then it will disappear because of budget issues, or two jobs open up. I mean, there's a lot of surprises that can happen within that process. In short, you just want to buckle up for a year that can be an emotional roller coaster, investing your time, waiting for things to happen, imagining that within those timeframes, people go away for break for a month in December and nothing happens during that time, and imagining the kinds of conversations that are happening or not happening in between those pauses. So it can be an emotional roller coaster, and again, that we do want to acknowledge it. But we do want to start to set up some of the things that you can prepare for. And again, many of you who are already on the job search are probably already thinking about this. A lot of this is going to be time management. So knowing upfront how much time you're going to dedicate to this. In some cases, it's like a full-time job. And again, knowing that you're dissertating at the same time, thinking about the things that you can control in terms of course schedule, other sort of service obligations that you may be taking on during this time. Think about realistically what you can do, because this is an area that you don't want to shortchange in terms of developing your materials, getting your dossier ready. Organization of materials is going to be very helpful, making sure you have all of the materials ready to develop your personal statement, your research statement, which we'll get into in detail a little bit more. Some of these are going to be questions that you're going to be wrestling with along the way. You know, what are your priorities? What's going to be most important to you? Is it going to be R1 or bust? Is it going to be geographic location that are going to be driving your decisions? Is it going to be international considerations, right? For many of our international students, whether a university can indeed support and sponsor international students. All of these things are going to be important criteria for you, but they're also going to be very, very personal to your own situation. So understanding going into this, what your sets of priorities are, again, so you can kind of manage the kinds of jobs you apply for or decide not to apply for. And then identify what you're open to. I've also seen the opposite working with doctoral students where they're like, okay, I only want to work at an R1 university in California. And you think, okay, good luck, but you may have to open that prospect up. You may have to open up what you're willing to do, at least for that first job. Again, that would be a personal decision, but to identify the things that you're open to beyond say, for example, an R1 job in a large metropolitan market, right? See, just sort of imagine that. This is going to be another part of this. Again, we'll get into this when we get into some of the nuts and bolts. Inform your team. And again, you're not alone in this process. You have an advisor and a committee who are generally fully supportive of the work that you're doing. Your primary point of contact, your tour guide through this process is going to be your academic advisor, your faculty advisor. They are going to be your champion. They're going to be the one that guides you through this. And so make sure that you're in constant conversation with your advisor and they know your priorities and you're having this one. So again, be in conversation with them. But the support team, the other members of the committee and other folks that you think might be speaking on your behalf in terms of a recommendation, that's important to let them know so they can plan for that. And they can write letters that are going to be really well tuned to kind of the interests that you're looking for. Again, I've had both experiences. I've had really well organized students who come in and say, okay, these are the 6 jobs I'm applying for this year. I just want to give you a heads up so that you can expect a letter of recommendation to be written sometime in November. I can plan for that. I've had the other experience where students, I'll just get a prompt for a letter of recommendation and the student just never told me about it. It's very hard, and again, we'll get into this in more detail. It's just hard to write a letter under those kinds of conditions. So again, this is stuff you can start to plan for early on, just letting your team know where you are in the process and what they should expect so that they can plan for it. And then we'll talk about it at the end. It's just getting a sense of what the job boards are, the listservs, the resources that are available to you. Some of them are going to be generic, right, to all disciplines, but some of them are going to be very, very specific to your discipline. Again, just to give you kind of a sense of kind of what the generic time frame looks like. Again, it might differ from university to university, but it seems like job postings are coming out early and earlier now, like almost towards the end of the previous academic
Even
year.
in the summer.
Right, in summertime. And so, and then you're going to get them as late as October, right? Things that are starting to pop up around now. But summertime, early fall is generally the time frame where you're starting to see these job posts. typically, again, this could vary by institution to institution. Application materials are due right around now. So sometime between October and November. It's rare to see it going into December, but that does happen in some cases. But I'd say the majority you're starting to see due around this moment, which means that you're probably wanting to work on your materials before then, right? So that you can fine tune it, you can craft it. Then you start to get invited to a smaller selection. So what happens typically is that universities start to convene again. We don't meet up really until the beginning of October, right? So that means no work was really being done as a committee until October for us, and we're late in the game. And so then they start to meet as a committee, then they start to make selects, and then they will invite a short list for Zoom interviews. Again, like it could vary, but typically 8 to 10 people, sometimes more, depending on again, the ambitions of the committee. And then they will narrow it down. Yes, Philippa.
So I was wondering if this is really specifically for a tenure track position or if it's also for like career lecturers or postdocs?
Anybody want to take that? Because
I think it's different. It may vary by discipline, but I think primarily we're talking about tenure track positions. If I were in charge of a postdoc, I probably would want to do a Zoom interview or a phone call before inviting someone to campus, but I think it really varies. You'll see in generic job postings, like I just went to anthropology yesterday, and in the disciplines website, the American Anthropological Association, probably every professional association that is tied to your discipline has a job site, but more than half of what's up there often is lectureships, right? So these are sometimes fishing expeditions, or there's a real distinction in these different kinds of jobs, right? So it's important, I think, to focus on the kind of job that you want and the process for a postdoc versus a part-time lectureship is going to be really good.
yeah, and those are more capricious. Like a tenure track job is like the funding is secured probably a year before. And then with postdocs and I'd say visiting assistant professors can be a little bit more capricious depending on budget and when they start to come up. Excellent. And so then these interviews happen, and then this is where it gets kind of angsty. Then people break right around December, and so you may not hear a lot of stuff going on. In some cases, you'll get the invitation for the on-campus job talk. Again, we'll talk about what that process looks like. In other cases, you may not get the invitation until January. But generally, that's when people start bringing people onto campus for job talks and research presentations to be members of the faculty. That's generally a much shorter list, typically around 3 folks per job. Again, that could vary depending on the budget. Because of some budget issues in SOJC, we've narrowed it down to 3, which gets a little uncomfortable, but it will really vary, but 3 is pretty typical. And then at that point, they move somewhat expeditiously, but this is academia. There's always some deliberation, some approvals that need to happen at the faculty level and then the administrative level. So a couple of weeks could go by before the final offer happens. And then there's a negotiation process at that point. Yeah.
Often, people come for campus visits, an offer is made. Often candidates have multiple offers, right, that they negotiate. So sometimes what happens is everyone who came for a campus visit doesn't accept an offer, and you have to bring more people. Because it's very bad in a search for it to be, quote, failed. And you have to start all over. So just to add that it's possible in these processes that you could get an invitation really late in the game if a search is in that process.
And also that process.
It's not infrequent.
Yeah, that what Lynn just said is important about if you were one of a group of people who came to campus, if they offer it to someone else, that person has 3 weeks, I think 2 weeks to reply, and sometimes they can extend it by special fiat. And so you might actually get an offer much later, like there might be a much longer gap. It's true people are moving fast, but all the rules that sort of protect the person who gets the offer, which people want when you're that person, can extend that process as well. And I've heard of people getting offers really.
Yeah, it really varies by university. I mean, this university is unionized. So there's a very clear date by which offers must be made, but private universities or universities that are not unionized you know, there's a lot of squish room, so don't assume that the conditions here at U of O that you might be vaguely familiar with. And even watching hires as graduate students, there were a lot of hires last year. People may have seen job candidates. Don't assume that the process that you observe here is the process that you will go through.
Excellent. So that's the typical process. Oh, yes, of course.
I assume this might vary by committee, but if it's not a situation where you're getting an offer, will they tell you? Or will they just not, and if eventually some point you'll decide it's not gonna happen?
If you were invited out, you were almost always on.
I mean, if you're invited out, people will stay in touch and say things like, I mean, I don't know how many people I've hired at the U of O, but
Yeah.
you know, we're just touching base. We want you to know that you're still being considered, you know, which is kind of a signal that things are kind of in process. You know, so there's a lot of nuanced languages from the perspective of the committee. You know, people, like I said, there are people who are negotiating multiple offers and you have to interact with them and they say, well, this other place is offering me this, or how about a spousal hire? Or, you know, can you guarantee this or that? So there's a lot of back and forth. So that, I would say that's the least predictable and sort of, it could be really short or could be months kind of time.
Yeah, and just to add one more thing to that, like there are probably multiple points of contact or communication that you might get. One would be from like HR or the university, and you'll typically get something at the end of the close of the search that says, sorry, you were not considered, right? But clearly at that point, you would have guessed that you were not. Within the search committee, it does get a little bit more ambiguous depending on kind of how long these negotiations play out. Typically, search committees don't like to close off any doors until there's been a firm offer that's been accepted. At that point, they might, again, if they're generous, let people know. But I mean, there are probably some bad actors out there that may not, right? They're just keeping their options open. But there is some ambiguity there.
I think there's.
Wait, we were
Oh, yeah.
on top of a Q&A.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just add one more thing, which is there's a lot of communication among graduate students on the job market in the same field. At least I know in anthropology, people know pretty much who's been interviewed where, how that's going, who's been asked to go a certain place, right? There are networks for that. So that's something else to kind of, you know, keep your.
Yeah, so that's the generic process. Lynn's going to talk about the components of a dossier. That's going to be one of the first things that you do. And I can scroll when you.
Okay, sure. Go ahead. I just added one other thing, which isn't on there, which is blogs. What I'm going to try to do is talk about the different pieces of your dossier. And I'm going to use a University of California anthropology job this year. You know, it's impossible to speak to everybody in every discipline. But these are components that I think are pretty typical. And the UC system, for example, requires the same things from every field, every job, right? And that's often, I would say, UW. I pulled some material from UW too. I know it's a West Coast bias, but and I'm going to go through each of these. One is your CV, and I'm going to talk about very specifically what headings you need and what to put there. Your cover letter. This is a super important piece that many people write like 5 or 6 drafts of that needs to match each job description. It's not good. And your references also, if you conclude your professors to take some time to say something specific about the particular job, right? Some systems use Interfolio. Is everyone familiar with that? Interfolio? Yes. Okay, this is it's a service that some search committees use that allows you to use like one dossier that then is accessed by different institutions, right, for jobs. And in that case, your references are going to write a more generic letter about you because they don't know, you know, and it's good for the people writing the letters because they don't have to write, you know, 15 or 20 letters, which, you know, and tailor them. So, so the cover letter, I'll talk a lot more about that. Most searches are asking for 3 references. Increasingly, they are not asking you to get those letters initially because in some searches that are very broad, you can get 300 or 400 applications. Okay, so it takes a very long time if it's a broadly cast search like the one I'm going to show you. If it's more narrow, you know, and very specific, the one we did in anthropology last year for cultural Latinx studies, you know, could have been, and we offered different interpretations of that, but we didn't get 300 applications, right? We didn't just say we want a great anthropologist or a great planner, you know, who works with city governments or whatever it is, right? So it's really going to vary. But if that's the case, then probably it's a good strategy to apply to some broadly defined jobs as well as some that just like match you really well. There may be different mechanics because going through 400 dossiers just takes a tremendous amount of time. Most dossiers include a research statement, usually about 1 page, a teaching statement, and not everywhere, but in the UC system at the U of O, University of Washington, a statement on contributions to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and we'll talk about that. Some places require 1 letter initially to give the committee, and then if you advance through the process, they ask for the letters later. Usually, if you're gonna do 8 or 10 people for Zoom interviews, you're gonna want to see those letters to make those decisions. And most HR departments, human resource departments, have specific guidelines for the kind of data that a search committee has to provide at every step, you know, like, let's say you have 100 applicants. How did you eliminate those that you're considering on a long short list that you solicit more? Let's say you solicit a writing sample and you get the letters. How did you move from there to the Zoom interviews, right? So what they're going to ask for is kind of goes along with the steps in the process of elimination. Okay. Okay, so one thing about thinking about the dossier is to think about it as an integrated set of information. And it gives you a chance, you want to use each element to communicate different things, right? You do not want to repeat in your cover letter what's in your teaching statement or your research statement. A cover letter basically grabs people's attention, right? So you may, some people recommend, I see you have Karen Kelsky's book, The Professor is In, which is a really great resource. I think it's in the library electronically. There's another book called The Academic Handbook that the U of O has an electronic version in the library that you can look at that looks at some of these specific elements in the job process. And they're really, really well done. Karen Kelsky was once a faculty member here in the anthropology department. So a cover letter, again, is not generic. The most important thing, and this is where the work comes in, that you really have to calculate is you identify an ad. You look at the ad, I'm going to give an example of how to do this, and then you pull out those elements that you need to hit on in your cover letter and also be thinking about in your research and teaching statement. So one of the first things to do, I think, we can go to this ad. This is an ad from the University of California, Davis for a tenure track position. It's kind of in between general, but with some more specific things. So the first thing you want to do are 2 things. Look at the ad very specifically, then go to the website of the department and look at the faculty and look at how does this department advertise itself? What are the strengths? What are people doing? Because one of the other important things about cover letters is that you show an awareness of who's already in this department, what they're doing, and how you might fit in. And by the way, that's also really strategic information for giving a job talk. I've seen people not do research and come to this campus and really not even know what the people they're meeting with or the search committee does for the department. So that is that is something you can keep a file on, right? You do this research for writing the letter, but then you've also got that same information. By the time you apply for 15 jobs, you're not gonna remember, right? But you've got that information when you know, if you get asked for the Zoom interview, then you've got that, you've already been thinking about it. Okay, so in this case, okay, everyone wants research, a cutting edge project. It says, you know, in this case, addresses contemporary issues, challenges. Okay, so the ideal candidate will have a rigorous theoretically and methodologically innovative research agenda that engages some of the critical concerns of our time and complements and expands our department's strengths. Okay, so that means you need to say something about what you're doing theoretically, like a punchline. You don't need to cite a bunch of people or yourself. My work intervenes in important conversations on global inequalities by race and gender. That's what my work does. Or it intervenes in policy discussions in drug addiction programs and how that relates to stages of life development and adulthood. Okay. Then, okay, it says more specifically, we're particularly interested in, and this is where departments are like reaching out and saying, hey, these are things that we could give you a leg up, okay? Not required, but particular interest. In this case, different and creative ways humans have responded to challenge of escalating xenophobia and racism, okay? If your work is on race and media in the global context, right? That would be something you wanna put in your cover letter, intensifying environmental change or growing inequalities in wealth and health, okay? So just work with your advisor and you can work with each other. It's really great to have students who are applying together in your department or across departments do this kind of collectively. And then creative forms of scholarship and modes of thinking. So in this ad, I would say, maybe it's not just producing a book, maybe it's producing films, maybe it's producing websites, like multimodal forms of expression. The academy is super behind, right? In terms of we make people produce dissertations and turn them into books and articles, but the actual world, you know, and I think increasingly departments are putting this in their job descriptions. Okay, so those are the things you want to hit on. They say this is what you need: a CV, a statement of research and teaching, copies of scholarly writing. And this is another thing that we didn't put on the list, but if most places, at least in social sciences, I won't speak to the other disciplines, but I imagine in journalism and communication, your dossier might include video work, it might include social media work, I don't know. But having those other forms of packaging your research may be something that is really good to think about, in addition to writing. When we did a search last year, because we were interested in different modes of expression, we actually encouraged people who made films or had other forms of expression, like that was a legitimate thing to submit, not just your dissertation chapters. If you have 0 dissertation chapters completed, unless you have published articles, this can be really tricky, because having just in most searches, people are going to be done, or they're going to be very close to being done, or they're at least going to have 2 or 3 substantial chapters, not first drafts, but kind of, you know, been polished. So thinking carefully about what you actually send is really important. Okay, so in a cover letter, these are just some general suggestions. Like I said, summarize your research and accomplishments and connect them directly to those key elements of the ad. And your cover letter should not be 5 pages, it should be like 2 pages at the most, including the signature block. So you're not going to give, like, you know, the 5-paragraph version of your dissertation. You're going to have like a very punchy abstract, and you're going to adjust it to emphasize the parts of it that connect with the ad, right? If you, you know, you can describe your dissertation, but in the social sciences or book-based disciplines, you want to pitch your work as a book, right? Now, I'm gonna continue working on my dissertation. You wanna envision yourself as an author of a book and that you're gonna be working on this book project, that you're planning additional research, because people look at this and they think, is this person gonna get tenure? Are they on the road? Are they thinking like they are gonna get tenure? Include how your research connects to others in the department. That's why I said, look at the website. You know, you can even mention, you know, several people also do work on global inequality and health. Here is how my project contributes to that, but perhaps adds to that conversation. So it's very staccato. It's not lots and lots of description, but kind of really cutting to the chase. You can mention specific teaching that you've done and how it might match, but again, you don't, your teaching statement is where you get to talk about how you teach, your philosophy, maybe some examples, but you don't want to put 2 paragraphs in a job letter about this great class that you just finished teaching, right? You can say, I teach this class on X. It could make a contribution to what you already offer and connect in this way, like one sentence or 2 sentences. You probably don't want to say, I can teach 10 of your classes, because that's probably not realistic. And again, don't repeat your teaching philosophy verbatim in the letter. Use that. Okay, headings for a CV. I printed out just a few, not probably enough. I had no idea how many people would come, but these headings, this is like expanding them. This is from one of Karen Kelsey's columns. The professor is in, so I don't know, I can pass a few around. You can look it up online.
And if you email us, we'll have
Yeah.
electronic copies of some
So
of these
first you
documents.
want to put your education. Let me make sure I hit on all this. You know, your undergraduate education, you don't need your high school, any MA you have, any additional certificates, your PhD. And this is in order on the CV, the way most search committees are going to look for it. Maybe it varies a little bit by discipline, but okay, publications, all right. Publications, usually refereed publications, or if they're unrefereed or peer-reviewed publications, awards and honors. Did you get a fellowship, an NEH fellowship, an SSRC, a National Science, or a SILF fellowship, which is pretty common at the U of O for people who do research abroad. Whatever that is, whatever fellowships you got, especially for your research, put those up there, because that says this is a quality person. They were able to get funding for their graduate dissertation research, so they're likely to know how to write that kind of proposal to get funding if we offer them a job. Awards and honors. Did you have grants? Like, again, did you get a grant? What was the amount? Were you honored as it, like, there's a GE, outstanding GE award at the U of O. There may be awards in your departments around teaching. Any award that profiles, you know, your abilities is important. Grants and fellowships, again, if you have a postdoc when you're applying, if you did, you know, a fellowship of any kind, invited talks, you know, and these are categories that go in your CV often after you have a job. So as a graduate student, invited talks, you could list job talks that you give at other universities. Those are invited talks. Conference presentations. Did you present a paper at a graduate student conference, at a professional conference? Did you organize a panel where you were discussant? All of that conference activity, and then distinguish talks on campus from professional associations. Teaching experience. I think it's good to list the classes that you have done, for example, the GE in, but if at all possible, it's really great to get some independent teaching experience as the instructor of record, so that you can put that on your CV. That really matters. It's service to the profession. Most of you probably won't be doing this, but some people, you know, some professional associations have grad student reps, right? In American studies or anthropology, or some subgroup where you were maybe you were participated in refereeing on a journal, anything like that. Did you do service in your department? A lot of departments have graduate committees. In anthropology, we have the Association of Anthropology Graduates. There are STEM associations. There are other ways that, where you're a steward in the union. Community involvement and outreach. Is your research involved with communities? What communities? How does that work? Media coverage. Have you been on the radio? Have you done other media or social media things? Other professional skills you might have, maybe that's GIS, maybe it's how to make videos, whatever that is, languages. And then professional memberships and affiliations, you probably will belong to one or two professional associations, and then your references. Okay, I'll just go through these quickly because I think we want to move along, but your teaching statement sort of outlines your philosophy, suggests challenges that you might face, the kind of ethics or goals that you have. And it's, kind of about your teaching beliefs and practices. Like, how do you include different kinds of students in class? How do you deal with students who have accessibility issues? How do you create an environment where people feel comfortable? And this is a question that could work for face-to-face teaching as well as online teaching. How many of you have been GEs for online classes? Okay, so address that, because increasingly, and saying I have experience in doing online teaching is good, because universities, they're there, right? Like often 25% or more of the offerings are going to be online or hybrid, where maybe you led an in-person discussion section and the lectures were online. Strategies for addressing challenges faced by underrepresented minorities. If you identify as an underrepresented minority, put that in there and how that affects you. If you're not an underrepresented minority, address that. That's actually a question in our search committees that we ask everyone in Zoom interviews. We kind of give some situations and ask people to talk about it. Okay, your research statement, again, short, 1 to 2 pages, not a 5-page description of your dissertation. What does your dissertation do? Your research, what kind of research is it in conversation with? And what are your future plans, right? So not only the dissertation in terms of itself, but how does it relate to the wider field that you're applying in? And also sort of connecting to that particular university and department, like those are some of the elements. Okay. Okay, these really vary. Diversity and DEI statements, and it's really important to look at the specific guidance if there is any. This is actually, I think, from the University of Washington. So all University of Washington searches have this. I think there's one for UC too, but specific ways that you would advance this particular department's commitments to anti-racism, future plans to advance equity and inclusion. How does your teaching, anything you might have done as a grad student in your department or across the university or national context, that is important to bring in, and your past experience, your background, how that relates to your philosophy about DEI and how that, how that works. Again, it really varies, but for some searches, it's really required. And now at our university and many, when people come up for tenure or for a 3rd-year review or a 1st-year review and their 1st year of being a professor, they have to, talk about this. So it's a good rehearsal for understanding how to do this. Okay. Can you, I don't know if that will open. One of the other things I just wanted to mention as an important, either one. Yeah, these are 2 former students of mine. Yvonne Sandoval Cervantes is at Okay. Is at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and Mauricio Magaña is at UC Davis, but many people create a blog, a personal blog. That's really part of their job, right? Where you can say things in your blog, it's like an archive, right? Where you're gonna send people these really brief, these statements. But it's another way of having more material out there, right? So I just put those up there, it says I'm a cultural anthropologist from Ciudad Juarez, Mexico. I'm currently working on blah, blah. So look at some of those blogs. You don't have to put up a huge amount of information, but again, it's a way to kind of expand what's out there about you, right? Committees are usually not asking about it, but people look. And the other just sort of word of caution is about TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. That all goes with you. I mean, it's not part of your job application, but in the current climate, just be aware of what you're posting. That's
Excellent. So that's the dossier. Then you submit it, and then it moves forward, hopefully with the process. So Laura will talk us through the actual process. Okay.
So as Christopher mentioned, I'm a faculty in English, and in that capacity, I have been the job placement officer in that department. And some of your programs will have someone who specifically works on job placement. We actually have a class that we do every year. Other departments have, trainings. This is a training. But the real reason I'm here is I'm actually the associate dean for CLLAS for graduate studies. And what I'm going to go, we were each given 10 minutes, so I'm about to go over in 10 minutes what I would normally teach in 2 separate days of about an hour and a half to 2 hours. So it's just like the bears of outline. So what I have done is revise the handouts that I used to give in English to the job interview, preparing for that, and preparing for the on-campus visit and doing the on-campus visit, which are much longer documents. And before you leave, I'd ask that you take them, but don't look at them now because they will simply distract from the outline. So bear in mind, these are like massive topics, and hopefully we'll still have some time for Q&A. I'm just gonna set my timer so I make sure I don't mess that up. So you guys will have, I bet, a million questions. So the first thing that I would say, so I'm going to start with the preparing for the interview. And as Christopher said, the vast majority of first interviews, which are typically short form interviews, somewhere between like 25 to 45 minutes, are now on Zoom or the telephone. But it is still the case, as used to be much more commonly the norm, that some disciplines will still interview at conferences if the conference timing makes sense according to the timing of the job search. So you want to kind of look out for those as well. And I will say I haven't been job placement officer in a long time, but then I was DGS and blah blah blah. So the interview document is it does also assume that there might be an in-person component, but it's obviously a very different strategy. And the main difference that I would say is, if you're thinking about what you're going to wear on a Zoom interview, you can have pajamas on your bottom half, but obviously in person, you need to dress either way. The top needs to be professional, in person, the whole, and know that at this university, all the way up through faculty and even deans, we are much more casual in how we dress than in other places. So when you go out on the job market, you want to kind of level up in that way a little bit, even if it feels uncomfortable. And a lot of people I know recommend like wearing those clothes for a while so that you do feel comfortable and confident in them and identify with them. And I'm already getting too detailed. But so the first thing I would say in preparing for the interview is do a mock interview. Many departments will offer this. You'll submit your materials to a faculty committee, or sometimes there'll be grad students on that committee, fellow grad students. You'll have the full interview experience. You'll be like in role, the whole time. Sometimes you can have like a safe word to break character briefly. Some people do that. Nothing is more useful to you than actually trying out the experience. And ideally, it would be faculty you don't know as well. Usually faculty will volunteer for this. And also, ideally, I would say, if you can possibly record it, that would be really great, because it was pivotal for me watching. I got really helpful feedback, but watching what I was doing with my body and my hands really helped me not do things with my body and my hands that were distracting to the interviewers. People are often scared of having the faculty you kind of know do that with you, but think about what's gonna happen. You're gonna go into this place that's much more consequential for you, like where you might get a job. So you wanna practice here, like it's fine if you, you can get out of your system in the States and get advice on them. So let me just talk quickly about, I need to speed up, so I'm already going into way too much detail. So for the interview, you've sent out your materials that Lynn has so helpfully described, and then eventually they're gonna start contacting you. You need to be checking your messages really closely. You need to be checking your email really closely. In some weird cases, they'll send it to your box. That's less and less happening, but it's still possible. When you will typically be speaking either with a search chair, a department chair, or a staff member, you are they will tell you when the interview is. They will schedule it with you. They'll give you possible times, and they will also tell you who is on that interview committee. And if they don't, you can ask. And that will allow you to do some of the work that Lynn was rightly saying you need to do earlier, which is start researching the department and sort of learning a little bit, especially about these people, what they're interested in, what their field is in. What's an interview? What does it look like? We are again talking about tenure line positions. Some of those might be teaching jobs. Some of those might be community college jobs, which are often tenure track. So I'm trying to adapt this very, very broadly. But a typical interview, even at a teaching position, in most cases, although maybe not sometimes the community college, they'll still be interested in your main interest though, because it affects your teaching, right? Like what you know how to do, will contain components on research and teaching, and sometimes a little bit more broader departmental life. But those will be in different proportions, right? A research university, you're going to be talking a great deal about your research and maybe less about the teaching. What you should prepare, very often the first question is about your dissertation, or later on a book or whatever. They will often give you a cue about how long to answer. So I actually recommend preparing answers of like 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. They will actually say, can you give us a 10-minute description, or can you spend, or they'll indicate in the question how much detail they're looking for. So you want to practice those. And what you want are clear examples that convey what your focus is, what your contribution is, and the stakes of the argument, and what it kind of will teach them, what they'll walk away like knowing or thinking differently. And then they will ask follow-up questions, right? You don't have to do everything in that initial answer. You're just practicing a kind of intro, and it's great if they want to ask you more questions. That's always the best possible thing. That's the main thing to prepare. And I will say, I'll also say something about the teaching questions that you're going to get. The classic mistake when you're asked how to teach a class, this is the main thing you want to avoid, is that people start going through a syllabus in their mind. First I do this text, then I do this text, and then I do this text. It's tedious, and it isn't teaching them about you as a teacher. So when you're asked about a class or teaching in general, you want to start with, if they say, well, how would you do an intro to the discipline, or kind of thing like that, or a gen education class in your field, or a basic majors class in the field. The first thing you want to think about and say is, here's what I want my students to learn from this class. What I want them to walk away is knowing X and Y. Simplify, right? Even that shouldn't be like a list of 12 things. And so for X, I like to start them off with these texts because they teach them this idea. We have these conversations, we do this experiential learning piece, and this is what they learn, right? So you want to really emphasize your teaching outcomes, essentially, how you're thinking about educating people. So these are my like really quick and dirty, again, I have a much longer document. These are my really quick and dirty things about research and teaching. There's a lot going on when you're in an interview. So when you think about the interview form, here are a few things that you want to bear in mind. Listen to the full question. That is actually something I realized I was doing wrong when I saw myself video. I was anticipating a question and almost starting to answer a question that maybe hadn't been the question that was asked. It was the question I expected. And it's really important to hear the question and think about what they're really asking, hear it out. It's fine to take a pause to frame your answer. You always want to speak as though your words have significance to you and to others. So it's good to go slowly, not my nature, but it's really very important. Second principle, answer short. as with the dissertation, you don't want to like to give your whole entire theory of everything that the question was about. You want to give a kind of entry answer and then they can ask for elaboration. One of the problems when you're interviewing people is the long talkers. You usually have a set of required questions. You're asking everyone the same questions for equity purposes. And the candidate might answer like a 10-minute answer to, it's like one of 10 questions and you're running out of time already. And actually that means also people cut you off. It may not mean they're dismissing you. It's maybe that they're trying to give you an opportunity to get through all the questions. So always try to answer really short and come to a clear stop. So that they know you're done. In the case where you're in person, and then eventually in a second interview on campus, you will be in person, almost always. When someone asks you a question, the natural thing is to look at that person who asked you the question, but the committee is asking the question. They've usually distributed them. So look around at everyone as you answer. You're really answering. So make sure you're not just focusing on one person and not also the most powerful person. Like don't always focus on the search committee chair, or don't ignore maybe people who sort of might appear to have less power on the committee, like a graduate student representative, for example. That you're really speaking to everyone because they're learning about how you treat other people and how you teach in every time you answer a question. This applies to both interviews and on-campus visits. Sometimes you will be asked intrusive or illegal questions. Quick and dirty response to this. You might panic and answer it. You don't have to, but that's not natural. Don't beat yourself up over it. They're the ones who did the wrong thing. Don't take it personally. It's not usually hostile. On one campus visit, very memorable one, I was asked 8 illegal questions about my sexuality in 2 different directions, about my religion, about my marriage status. Like, this was not a situation where people were hostile or biased. They really hadn't had a search in a long time and like no one had reviewed the policies with them. So don't take anything, they don't know you. You don't need to take things personally. You try and demur. You can kind of joke it out. I could be, what do you mean? I can be tall. I can be, you can say, you can set sort of boundaries or be vague. If they ask you about children, oh, we haven't really decided, and you can kind of set boundaries. And my go-to there is they ask you an illegal question and you pretend that the rule is governing you when it should have governed them. Oh, I don't think I'm supposed to answer that, which is not saying, oh, I don't think you're supposed to ask that, right? I'm not supposed to answer, and that like lets them off the hook very gracefully. This was sort of alluded to earlier as well, but interviews, no matter how they go, whether you never hear back from these people again or whatever, it is a great experience to have. It's one of a few times in life where smart people who already think highly of you because they pulled you out of 400 applications to interview just 12 people. You've already won at that point, especially when you get to the campus visit, that's really true. Pay attention to you, are interested in you, really, and one of the big things about this whole process, I think it often feels like the committees are like weeding people out, and that's what they're doing, trying to find a reason to drop you, like a competition, like a reality show or something like that. It's the exact opposite. Committees are haunted by the fear that they won't get the right person. They want everyone to do amazingly. They are really cheering for you, and that's the way to think about it when you're in the room. They want you to do well. If you're nervous, they'll often help you. They'll feed you easier questions. Very common to be nervous at the beginning. Don't worry about it. People's voice shakes. It's all good. You usually just get through it. You'll sort of even out. And down the road, you may find that an interview that it felt like went nowhere actually has all sorts of other fruits. I've had situations happen where people contact me later to do things with them. They're like, oh, I really liked your application. I never even got an interview in some of those cases, but certainly I've been interviewed by several schools twice. And the second time in both cases, I had campus visits, and I guess the second one was here too. Like that's when I was moving from one job to another. Was my second interview with Oregon, and worked out. So it's good to realize that what feels like rejection isn't always really a complete rejection. It might be they're like, oh, this person's great, but not for this job, or not right now. That's my interview, and I've already. Oh, am I thinking? I've gone over. Do you want me to go into campus visits?
Yeah, briefly, and then we can open it up for
I'm sorry,
questions.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's hard to compress this stuff. So on campus visits, again, you've already won at this point. 400 people applied for the job. They're bringing you back. They love all of you, right? And here again, remember that they want you to do well. They want you to succeed. They're not trying to pick apart holes. They're really just hoping for the best. When you go on campus, I'll talk a little bit more about this, but it's a challenge because it's an endurance event. It's like multiple days where you're like seeing constant people and doing all these different activities, which I'll talk about. Bear in mind, they're hosting and you're a guest. And it's not like a family guest, right? You're like a more distant guest. You want to be polite. You want to be open to the experience, you want to be having a good time. People may try and invite you into their confidence, don't fall into that trap. You don't really know these folks. Really, even if you get the job, it will take you about 3 to 5 years to really know the lay of the land in the department. So you just want to always have integrity and a little reserve, like a little circumstance. If they invite you to gossip about your home department, like, just, oh, it's been great, just always kind of maintain a positive and professional stance. When you're contacted here, you will get a full schedule, which should indicate all the people you're meeting. Again, you want to go research those people. And here's the things you might be doing, and probably almost all of them or all of them. Solo meetings with faculty, individual faculty, group interviews, like a second round interview, meeting with at least one dean. That's almost always the case. Meetings with graduate students, maybe undergraduates, a job talk, maybe a less formal presentation, teaching a class, mock teaching a class, like maybe to faculty, but often to students. You'll have meals. They may give you tours of the campus, tours of the city, real estate tours, receptions, parties, city tours. So that's what I mean when it's an endurance event. I've got a lot more details on my handout. Again, you kind of want to be, generally, the unit of experience is the conversation. And one great thing to do all the time is ask people about their experience and about their work. People love to be asked about their work, especially academics. And you'll learn a lot about the department, about the people. You can ask about the students. People love to talk about their students, their favorite things on campus, their favorite things about the school. Is that kind of, you don't want to like ask for bad things. And again, really compressing the talk. They'll give you a time amount. Go at the lowest or a little bit lower than the bottom estimate. Like, don't go long. Don't be the person people are like, when will they end? Be the person who they want to ask questions immediately after the talk. So if they say, give us a 30, 40-minute talk to 40-minute talk, go for like 32, 30-ish. They sometimes say, oh, just talk informally. Do not take that literally. Prepare something. You can give like an outline of your, they may ask for both teaching and research, do whatever they say. But then you might have brought along like, oh, I'm just going to read from an example from my dissertation just to give it in its most concise form, like so that you have something like formal to work from yourself. And often when people say they want something informal, they're sending a signal that they want something accessible, right? That everyone in the room can understand. And you'll want to ask them, this is in the sheet as well, you want to ask them who's going to be there. Are there going to be students there, grad students, people from outside the department? And then think about it, right? Make sure that whenever you're explaining your stuff, you're assuming you're talking to someone out of field. Like maybe you're mostly seeing other people in your exact field on the committee interviews and stuff, but the department is full of people who may not know about that area that closely. So you want to always explain as if to your parents almost, but with like a little more sophistication. Well, sorry, not that your parents aren't sophisticated. I just mean like a layperson. Yeah, sorry. Practice the talk out loud at least twice and time yourself. Something that we haven't yet talked about, when you're sending out the dossier and you send out examples of your scholarship, and I was shocked to see that asking for 3, that seems like so much. Think of what you want your talk to be, and then decide what you'll send out in the dossier as a sample, right? Your talk is going to be the most important thing. So if you have 2 great pieces, you have to decide which one of those will be the talk and which one you can send out right away. So you can't do them twice. And a couple just more things. Pragmatics, bring a lot of stuff to solve problems that you don't normally carry around, like needle thread, aspirin, just stuff that like earplugs if you're like, like sleeper.
Cliff bars or something that I've heard,
Yeah.
because sometimes you're just not eating.
Like check.
Yeah, tech and duplicate everything, like handouts on paper and email the handouts to yourself and the slides to yourself and then bring, just have redundancies built in. Don't get exhausted, don't get drunk at a meal. Because they will often like be drinking a lot of alcohol and they may start getting real boisterous and like they have the job already. So you just sit. Dean and chair conversations really quickly with deans are very unpredictable. Dean could be in your research area. Dean could have no idea, no interest in what you do. I've had everything from both. Like I've had a wonderful thing. But the dean like immediately asked me the question I had been somewhat fearing the whole time. And I was like, finally someone asked me this. Yes, and we had the conversation. Or I've had deans say, why would anyone be interested in that? And I got that job, just to be clear. But deans you can ask about what they're working on. Like, so what kinds of changes are you making right now in the college or whatever? They love to talk about that. Either the dean and or the chair is going to give you some actual pragmatic details of the search. Salary, potentially, though that may wait till later. Certainly teaching load, if you haven't already found out about it. Some of the conditions of the job. You can't ask for stuff before you've gotten the offer. So don't start talking about your spousal hire, don't ask for more money. Don't go like, that's all the salary is if they tell you, don't express disappointment. But that's when you find things out. Okay, and so I've also been asked to talk very briefly about the like offer, when you get an offer. When you actually get the offer, you must always say, I'm so delighted to hear this. This is wonderful news, right? Like, even if this is your last choice, because you don't throw away an option that you've just gotten, right? And you have a lot more to learn. That point, you can ask more details. That point, they will give you a salary offer. At this point, you want to say, this is so much to think over. Thank you so much. They'll send you materials and you have to then consult with your team. And Chris already talked a little bit about the team. I actually like an even broader team than Chris mentioned. Sorry, Christopher,
No, that's yeah.
I think not just your advisor. I think anyone any faculty who's good at talking about the job market is great to have to consult. Just consult really broadly, because then you hear what everyone has to say and you can decide what makes the most sense to you, what seems sensible, what seems ethical, what seems the most fitting with your personality. But this is the one moment in your academic career, I mean, you can repeat it if you move jobs, where you have any leverage at all. So you don't answer right away. You don't accept that job on that call. You consult your team. Maybe you have other offers going on. Maybe you haven't heard back. If you haven't heard back, you can call another school that hasn't let you know, like especially if you're at an interview stage, and say, hey, just want to let you know, I've received an offer from the University of Oregon, and my timeline is this, so I'd love to know more if you can let me know about the search. But you can ask for the moon at this point. You don't want to really ask for the moon. You want to ask for things that are reasonable to get. You can ask for a couple hard things that they can't give you, and that makes them more likely to give you the other stuff. Sometimes it's hard to know from the outside, though. But this school is bizarre, for example. They gave me things they never should have. I was shocked. Things that were on my fate list, and then they wouldn't give me like the simplest little thing that I asked for, which was like a $1,000 increase in salary to match my prior salary, which was the thing I was like, that'll be the easiest thing, and it was like, no. Make those asks at that point. Again, once you're here, you don't have any more leverage. Oh, things you can ask for. Credit for publications that you've already had, for tenure, higher salary, teaching releases so that your first year goes more smoothly, or teaching releases later in your career while your book is getting ready. If you're in a book discipline, that's when you ask for spousal accommodations. They may or may not be able to make those. You can ask about insurance. This is where you can really get creative, and your team should help you. You should have someone who can advise you.
Summer funding's another big one.
Yeah, summer funding in some. Yeah. All right. Sorry.
Thank you. No, that's wonderful. We did want to leave some room for Q&A. We had a section on resources. We're able to provide that to you. So if you send us an email, we can have all of these documents available to you, including the handouts, including the presentations. But we did want to leave some room for Q&A. So any questions from the group? Oh, yes, please.
So in the data vault application, so I have a master and I have a business there. Is it part of my publication?
Have you published your MA thesis? I mean, you can list it, just the title, but I wouldn't put it under a publication. What I would put it under is your education.
Yeah.
Master's degree from this place, title of thesis, that's how you could put it.
Can I also just add some more to that?
Yeah.
There's also work in progress, right? So you want to make sure that if you have manuscripts that are in the various stages, in production, in development, you do want to make sure that that's included in your publication if it's gotten to that point.
And do you guys know those? You probably may not know what those terms mean. So accepted but not yet published means someone has already said they'll publish it, and then published, and then in production means something like with a book. It's been accepted and it's like literally going through the mechanics of becoming a physical object. So that's like a really good one. And then in progress is only be honest there. Like if you're gonna be honest, be like 1%. Sorry, if you're gonna be dishonest, be 1%. Don't like list a bunch of stuff if it's not really something that you want to be asked about in detail, for example.
And committees could sniff that stuff out. They know
Okay.
where things are within the process. There were questions we hear, I think. Yes.
I mean, I was basically asking about that, but I was wondering, how would we differentiate an article in revision accepted but with revisions, and then articles under review, and then articles like in preparation to be sent to journals.
What you just said, accepted
Yeah.
pending revision.
Yeah, I mean, accepted, I would put it in, you know, sometimes you say forthcoming or, but I would put that under the peer reviewed publications. And break out those that are like accepted at some level and forthcoming from those that you're still working on, that you're targeting.
And once it moves into the in submission, like you've actually submitted it to a journal, it feels a little more concrete for committees, right? Like you have something that you were able to feel like you were able to submit to a journal. And then, you know, if it's accepted with revisions, then it becomes even more concrete. The in development is it feels ambiguous, right? And so it's a thing, but I think committees will look at that probably with some, you know, suspicion, I think. Yes.
At what stage can we talk about the visas, international?
Yeah, that was a question, and many of our students, for example, in the SOJC are international students. And so anyone from the panel wanted to sort of talk about how you advise students?
Well, I can just talk about the experience
Yeah.
from my department. You know, and I think it's an issue, it's definitely an issue to raise. Maybe in an on-campus visit, because, I mean, you at least want people to be aware of your steps. Right, because if they're, you know, people assume everyone's a citizen and a lot of people don't think about the privileges of citizenship. And that many people don't have them, including people who are not from another place, they're in this place permanently as residents, or they have temporary protected status, or they have DACA status. So I think figuring out when to make that visible. What I have seen is when chairs of departments or even search committees are not aware of what it requires to actually, it can take 2 years for, I've seen this in my own department, for someone to actually go back and forth between this university, their government, this government, you know, to get that visa. And it's a very labor intensive process. It often requires a lawyer. So if that is the case, then you also need to ask, especially if there's an offer, for support for a lawyer, because that's expensive. You know, most beginning salaries, they're not super high. And if you have to pay high rent, I mean, even in Eugene, it costs a lot just to live here. So if you have to come up with another $5,000 or $8,000 for a lawyer to help, you know, you get the visa so that you can keep your job long-term. And I think just bring it up and make sure that if the chair doesn't know, or the chair of the department, like they know who to ask. Like who works with international faculty and international students on campus. I don't know
If I could just add a couple of other things, again, because our program is highly international, about 45% of it. And so I've seen it happen, for the most part, go well, right? And so we're a global university, like universities are global in their talent pool, right? In theory, that's what they should be. I have seen that it can depend on the size of the university and how well resourced that university is. And now in more and more geographic location. So the resource is that, again, if it's an R1 and they want to bring in the best talent in the world, which is what we do, right? This is what we do. They're going to invest in those kinds of resources, and they're going to have an apparatus, a department or appointed contact or division that it will help negotiate that process or help navigate that process. Again, most of the times it hasn't been an issue, but there have been cases in which it has. In some cases, a smaller university may not have the resources to fund it. I've also seen it done for political reasons, and in certain states that are becoming more and more conservative to migrants, to people that are seen as outsiders. And I've seen jobs being withdrawn after the committee had given them offers. Again, those cases are rare, but they are considerations, right? They're considerations in a very much more political climate nowadays, right? So something to think about in that process. But I would say for the most part, most of our students have gone through the process and it hasn't been an issue.
I actually also had a question about that. I'm also an international student. How soon in the process is that something that you should let a search committee know? Should that be something that's told to the committee during the Zoom or phone?
So we were just no earlier than the on-campus visit.
No earlier than that. Yeah, you want to I mean, just, no. Yeah, I mean, there are certain things that you can't be asked about,
Which include this.
which
actually.
include this, so.
Citizenship status is protected.
It's, so definitely when you get an offer,
Yes.
maybe, that is the time to bring it up. After you have the offer, it might depend on who's on the committee, their level of awareness and the place.
Yeah, I think that's right. And what Chris said before about a bigger institution, it's typically gonna have more international employees.
Right.
It'll have a bigger HR department, more skilled. So
But like
if
a
you're in a
small
tiny
liberal
liberal
arts
arts
college, like,
it may not have come up,
yeah.
like depending.
Um,
I will say one other possibility, Chris mentioned most searches will bring at the on-campus stage 2 to 4 people. There are places that just bring 1. If you know you're the only one, that means you're their first choice. That has also happened to me. You can tell them that because they're gonna, that is, they will like offer the job to that person if they like the on-campus visit, but if they don't, they'll like go to the next person and they won't, as we were talking earlier, they won't tell you yet that you're not, because they're still like, maybe. So in that case, you certainly could, but the reason to wait is you don't want to make yourself suddenly seem like, oh, there's this little trouble knot that we're gonna have to deal with later. So you want, that's why you want a lot of these personal details to sort of just be blank slate. Yes.
So, I don't know exactly what visa you would be applying for if you were the tenure track route. But I know for some visas, it can be an issue if you only have a 9-month contract.
Yeah.
Is there, I've heard that you can ask the university to pay you out over 12 months, is that really a thing?
That is true, yeah.
Okay.
And nearly every place that does 9-month pay, you can, and here too, you can
you
get paid.
can
over
opt
12.
for that, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Anyone can. And partly for that reason, there's other reasons.
Jews, yeah, but that's another bit.
Yeah.
So how important are publications? Like how many we should get? Like, and realistically, well, you know how it is in our discipline, like we kind of, it's funny to hear that people are in their 7th year, but they want to take us out from SOJC in 4 years. So where do we stay with this?
So,
Go for it.
yeah,
I
so
think it depends on the discipline.
there's no number. It does depend on the discipline. There are disciplines where someone lives in finance here, right? I think in that discipline, to even get tenure, you're only trying to get like 1 or 2 publications because of the way publications work in that discipline, which are like 4 years to get one. So it really depends. And so you should consult with people in your discipline. But what I will say is that things are very competitive, as Chris said at the start, that a lot of the people applying for junior positions already have junior positions and they're trying to like level up. So they might have multiple publications. In our searches, we have different expectations of publication for someone who's just graduated versus someone who's been a professor for 1 to 3 years. Like we have an equitable shifting scale. If someone's been in a job for 6 years in a research job and they haven't published anything, or they've only done one thing, that's one thing. But if they're just graduating from their program and they have 1 or 2, that's great. I think, the publication, I think increasingly you want to have one ideally, or at least something under review. It has become competitive. But I would say the main thing is we were sort of talking, like, you really need to be ready to defend the dissertation. It doesn't have to, you could sort of maybe do it over the summer, but I wouldn't apply for jobs if you have like one committee track. It's just because as Chris started by saying, this takes so much time, energy, and emotional investment. Don't go out too early. And it's okay to do a trial run. I actually got my first job that way. But I only applied for a few, like I applied for like 16 jobs or something. My ambition was like I just wanted one interview sort of one of my committee members was like, you have to come to terms with the fact that you might get an offer. But it's okay to do that, but you want to make it like a less investment of time, not like 200 applications.
And I would, oh, sorry, go for it.
Oh, I just say, in the social sciences, I think definitely having 1 or 2 publications is a good idea. Often, at least what I've found in searches is you are competing, just as Laura said, with people who already are assistant professors and they want out. So hopefully, and a good committee is going to look at those differences, but someone who, and I just, I told this to my own students, and this is, it's this tension between time to degree and all this pressure to get people out. But if you go out too early, you're not gonna be competitive, right? Maybe it's a good experience, but there might be another job that opens up at the same place a year or two later. And it would depend, right? Like if they saw, well, this person really needed a lot of mentoring or a lot of, they weren't quite ready. So I think having, you have to have something substantial to show, which is at least a couple of strong interior chapters or something from your dissertation. And if you do have an MA thesis or something else, or something that's not going to go into your dissertation, thinking about that as an article. But just this whole process, I think a lot of people, they're like, oh my God, I have to do this all in like September, right? And it really, I think a really useful way to think about your career and even this, and especially people who are just in their second or third year, is something called back design, right? Where you look at where you have to be in a certain amount of time, right? And you begin developing those things on the way. So you're not in this situation of, oh my God, I have to go on the market and I have to produce all of this, but I'm teaching this summer and I have,
And I'm writing 3 articles.
and good mentoring from your advisors will support them.
Yeah, the only other thing I would add is again, think that there's not one type of university. And so there's heavy R1s, Research One University. Those are probably going to be likely more competitive and more expectation that there's going to be some publications, especially if it's at a top 25 or a top 50. So I think the expectation, the competition is going to be much greater. There are R2s that kind of act like R1s, R1s that act like R2s, but more kind of teaching oriented universities. It's probably going to be less live or die by the publication, right? They're looking at a collective, holistic view of your dossier and what
and
it
even, this is, I don't know, for example, this summer I was talking with a young person who's at a small liberal arts college, and it's very happy, and they can be good jobs. She needs like 3 articles for tenure, 3 or 4, so, but the emphasis is on teaching, right? So they're going to be looking at teaching. So it also depends on kind of like what kind of life do you want? What kind of pressure do you want to live under? I mean, or do you even get to choose and you just go for a lot of different things and kind of see what happens?
One thing I would say about that too, though, is one of my slogans in general, but definitely for this process, is don't take options away from yourself. Don't assume that I would never live in that state, or I can't live in a place that doesn't have this. Wait and see what it's like and actually be open to it. I thought I wanted a teaching heavy job because I love teaching. And when I didn't want it, I wound up in a very research intensive job for my first position, and it was great. And I started loving my research more. It was in a state I had never thought I would live in. I loved it there. So I really would, and a lot of these jobs, the teaching heavy jobs, are actually quite competitive because a lot of people would love to be around a small group of students teaching all the time. But know yourself too. Like if you love teaching, definitely apply for those jobs, but be open to other possibilities. Again, if I limited myself to those jobs, and it's funny. They're because those teaching heavy, like liberal arts college type little places, because they're small, like departments are often just 3 to 5 people, there's fewer jobs like that because there's fewer faculty. So there's more sort of university jobs because those are bigger, by the numbers. But really on the one hand, definitely know yourself. On the other hand, know that you may change. You might develop new things that you like.
So I was
Can
wondering.
I jump in just a second? Sorry, this is Erin on Zoom. Can people
Erin.
hear me?
Political science.
Yeah, I wish I could be there in person, but I want to say about the articles, the number of publications. I think sometimes we get a little like number obsessed with like the number of publications, but often different disciplines have like top tier journals versus like more mid-level versus more like ones that are easier. And as you progress through your grad career, you can sort of adjust, right, in terms of your timing. So I always encourage my students who are in their first couple of years, hey, let's really shoot for like a top tier, because you know what, if you get a rejection, you're going to get really good feedback, and then we can go to the mid-level, right? So you can sort of tier it down, versus, towards the end, you probably don't want to be applying to the top, the number 1 journal that's super competitive, because if you get a rejection, now your timeline is all thrown off for getting that publication. So sort of thinking about timeline that way. But also, I was on a job search last year, And I will tell you, the people we offered the jobs to were not, and that we brought out were not the people with the most publications. And in fact, one of them I think didn't have, maybe had one publication, but it was like a publication in like a really good journal, and like one had no publications, but it was working on a book project, right? And so it's okay if you don't have like 30. It's not just about the quantity of publications, but it's also the quality of the work. Here, something that wasn't really discussed here is that your letter writers need to know your project inside and out. I will say, by and large, the most important documents in your dossier are your cover letter and your letters of recommendation. And if it's a research school, your research statement. If it's a teaching school, your teaching statement. Those letters of recommendation oftentimes do a better job explaining the importance of your research than you do. That's just the nature of, we know the language, we know how to situate things in the field. And so if your letter writer can explain, look, this person published in this journal, which is like really good for X, Y, and Z, then brought people who might not be in that specific subfield will understand. Or, oh, this person has an excellent article that's ready for submission next week that I've read and I'm confident will lead to a publication, right? So there's some gaps that can be filled in with those letters on the publication front. But also remember, it's not just about quantity, it's about sort of quality and speaking to the audience that you want to be speaking to in your research down the line.
Excellent. Thank you, Erin. And then we'll conclude with Philippa's question.
So I was wondering, like, if you're looking at all these requirements and like how competitive it actually is, what could be your backup option that might still get you there after that job? What other job like sets you up where you can still be working on these things that will help you get the tenure track job? What would look good on your CV?
Well, you mentioned postdocs earlier.
Yes.
So there's some disciplines where that's the norm. We don't have too many people in the room in the natural sciences today, but in some places they expect that final stage of scholarly development will happen in the postdocs. They don't actually expect out of PhDs to have someone so advanced. In humanities, where there's almost no postdocs, they expect a higher level of polish. It's a different kind of thing. I have a more complicated answer to this that I won't give now, but actually all of you should be thinking about other kinds of careers that would draw on these same exact skills that you have now and have you doing the work you love in other contexts. We are going to be offering much more guidance on that, and we're going to be building much more out for that. I'm happy to talk to people if there's groups that want to talk. I'm happy to do a general talk on that too. But there's a lot of other ways to do exactly what you're doing now, or like to really be working on the problems that you like, or having the experiences that you enjoy. That happen in different contexts. There's many ways to teach. There's many ways to research and communicate what you find out, so.
Yeah, the other model is a visiting assistant professorship that you'll start to
Yes.
see pop up again later on. One of the things you just might want to consider with that is they oftentimes come with heavy teaching loads. And so is that heavy teaching load going to prohibit you from developing your work? And so that's a practical decision you would want to make.
That's
But
true of postdocs as well.
Yeah.
Some of them want you to teach like 3 or something.
yeah, so it could be.
How should be a good teaching portfolio? Because this is a new one, and this kind of makes positions between teaching and researching. So
I would ask your department, like I always had many examples on file when I was the job placement person of teaching statements. I think it's good to read a few of them. And I think in this case, you really want to see it in your discipline, because your discipline will, like, as I know, like has very specific pedagogies. But what it is doing is talking about, here's all the areas that I teach, but it's talking about your philosophy. It's talking about those questions about how you are teaching so that you're helping students with different kinds of barriers overcome them, or you're eliminating certain kinds of barriers, so there's a lot of elements to it. And then you also have sample syllabi.
And evaluation of the student and the faculties too. Because one position asks something like faculty evaluations or
peer review of teaching.
Yes.
Yeah, I would invite. Good question. Everyone should. This is a dossier question, really. I would always invite one of your committee members. Doesn't have to be the chair. To watch you teach, so they can talk about your teaching in detail. Maybe two. So they can talk about it. They've seen you teach and they say, oh, this is what she does so well, you know, and then she did this thing where she, you know, that's great. And to the
Or
point of,
even easier, you can offer if if they're teaching a class that is relevant to your research, say, I would love to come in and do a guest class for you. You take something off of your chair or your committee member's plate. Oh, that's one less class I need to prep. And you get the bonus of they can actually talk about you as a teacher.
Our resource on campus is the teaching effectiveness program. They can actually certify you in teaching, have people observe you. So that's a resource that I would certainly take care of. It can offer kind of a third-party validation. What we teach our students is that, because we get a lot of doctoral students that just want to teach in their areas, right? Like, I'm studying this, but in the reality, they're looking for people to teach sort of the generalist courses, the courses that the instructors currently don't want to teach. So if you can, so I could be an expert in my area, but I could teach these broad level classes for 200 undergraduates. That's going to make you extremely valuable. In our program, because we're also production oriented, if you could teach a theory class and also a production class, man, you can show you can have the whole portfolio of teaching. You just want to show range, I think, when it comes to teaching. Big classes, little classes, theory classes, practical classes, large, small. If you could show range, you're so much more marketable, we found.
and the conversation that you have in interviews about that as well, it's about how you understand the difference between a gen ed class and how you would teach that versus how you teach a class for advanced majors. And I'd also say something really important is you need to remember that you're auditioning to be a colleague. And so you want to not think of yourself as a student. So one thing, if it has a graduate program, you need to think about what graduate classes you would teach and make sure you describe that as well. It's kind of fun, like it's sort of hard to get there sometimes. Like, oh, right, you know, I'll be teaching grad students out here. But yeah, those are all, breadth is really important and you really will be doing like intro classes a lot of the time. Everyone does.
I think we have time for one more question, but yeah.
There's mention of a like job board website on the where.
Do you mean like where these?
Yeah.
Oh, like where are jobs listed?
Yeah.
Chronicle of Higher Ed has a ton.
Inside higher ed. So the two kind of big ones for the academy writ large are going to be like Chronicle of Higher Education, Inside Higher Education. I think it's Wikia Jobs, Academic Jobs has a subsection. But then beyond that, you really want to go deep into your own specific discipline. So in the SOJC, it'd be like NCA, ICA, all of kind of the main conferences within your area and the disciplines within those. That's where your advisor is really going to be insightful in terms of like, make an exhaustive list of all of these job boards that you're going to go to. And then it becomes sort of a management issue, but the more expensive, the better. Yeah.
If you become a member of many of some of those associations, they'll start like, you'll be part of their listserv and they'll ship you with jobs all the time anyways. Like, but to credit of our program director, she's doing that as well anyway.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Thank you all so much for your time. And then again, contact us if you want any of this information. We're happy to send it out. Thank you.
Thank you.